She carried 4 empty wine glasses stacked between her fingers. The tech billionaire was laughing at her expense, turning her into entertainment for his associate across the table. He asked her, the waitress in the green apron, what she thought about his $4 billion hostile takeover. It was supposed to be a punchline, but she sent 3 words that made the laughter die instantly. 3 words that would expose a hidden trap. 3 words that would save his fortune and resurrect her buried career. She said, "It's a trap. Walk." What Marcus Hale didn't know was that the woman refilling his Cabernet used to move venture capital with a single signature. She had been one of the sharpest minds in private equity until the industry she tried to protect blackballed her completely and forced her into hiding. Now, 3 years later, she was about to prove she never lost her edge. And it would be absolutely devastating. This is the true story of the waitress who saw what no one else could. Stay with me, because what happens next will leave you stunned. Welcome to Midnight Plot Stories. While you're here, please hit the subscribe button and comment your thoughts on the story and where you're watching from. Let me tell you about a woman named Tessa Brooks. At 29 years old, her entire world had shrunk down to the floor-to-ceiling windows of an upscale restaurant with a skyline view. This wasn't just any restaurant. This was the kind of place where young billionaires ordered $2,000 bottles of wine and snapped their fingers without looking up. Tessa was excellent at her job. Flawless, actually. She moved between tables like she didn't exist, never making errors, never drawing attention to herself. That's exactly what she needed, to be invisible, to be forgotten, to be safe. But Tessa wasn't always a waitress. No, her story was far more devastating than that. 3 years ago, Tessa had a different life. Back then, she was Tessa Brooks, one of the youngest vice presidents at a prestigious venture capital firm. She worked alongside powerful investors, and she had a gift for seeing patterns others missed. Tessa had flagged a massive fraud scheme at a partner firm, something so big it would have destroyed hundreds of portfolios. She trusted the system completely. She thought doing the right thing would matter. But then Tessa discovered something sickening. The fraud wasn't just happening at the partner firm. It was connected to people at the very top of her own company. People who had billions to lose if she kept talking. They didn't just fire her, they erased her. Legal threats, blacklisting, destroyed reputation. And the medical bills from her father's accident kept piling up, while no firm in the country would touch her. It was calculated. It was ruthless. And Tessa could see every move they made because she understood exactly how power worked in that world. The words hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. Marcus's grin froze on his face. His associate, David Chen, stopped mid-sip, the wine glass suspended halfway to his lips. The ambient noise of the restaurant, the clinking silverware, the murmured conversations, the soft jazz playing overhead, all seemed to fade into a thick, uncomfortable silence. Tessa didn't move. She stood perfectly still, her hand resting on the wine bottle she'd just set down. Her expression was calm, almost detached, like she'd just commented on the weather instead of torpedoing a billion-dollar celebration. "I'm sorry, what?" Marcus finally managed, his voice stripped of its earlier confidence. Tessa adjusted her glasses with one finger, a gesture so precise it seemed calculated. Omnicorp's corporate charter contains a Section 382 poison pill provision. If any single entity acquires more than 20% of outstanding shares without board approval, it triggers a dilutive rights offering to existing shareholders. You are planning a hostile takeover at 51%. She paused, her dark eyes meeting his directly. The moment you sign, you'll own 51% of a company that's about to issue enough new shares to reduce your position to roughly 18%. You'll have paid $4 billion for a minority stake with zero operational control. David's wineglass hit the table with a sharp clink. What the hell is she talking about? But Marcus couldn't look away from her. His mind was racing, trying to catch up. Section 382. Dilutive rights offering. These weren't terms you picked up from watching the news or overhearing conversations. These were the specific technical weapons that companies bury deep in corporate governance documents to defend against exactly what he was trying to do. How do you, Marcus started, but his throat felt tight. Additionally, Tessa continued, her voice steady and professional, as if she were presenting to a boardroom instead of standing in a fervor's apron. Omnicorp amended their bylaws 8 months ago to include a continuing director provision. Even if you somehow bypass the poison pill, the existing board members can't be removed without cause for 3 years. You'd be locked into their strategic decisions with no veto power and depleted capital. She picked up the empty plates with practiced efficiency. That's not an acquisition, Mr. Hale. That's a trap designed specifically for aggressive buyers like you. David let out a sharp, nervous laugh. Okay, this is insane. Marcus, she's clearly... Who are you? Marcus interrupted, his voice barely above a whisper. The arrogance had completely drained from his face. He looked at Tessa like she'd just pulled off a mask to reveal someone else entirely underneath. Tessa's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. For just a fraction of the second, something flickered in her eyes. Regret, maybe her fear. She'd said too much, revealed too much. The invisible armor she'd built around herself over 3 years had just cracked wide open. I'm your server, she said quietly, her voice losing its edge. And you should verify everything I just said before you sign anything. Then she turned and walked away, her footsteps silent on the polished floor, leaving Marcus Hale staring after her, with his $4 billion deal suddenly feeling like a loaded gun pointed at his own head. Marcus blinked once, twice. Then the spell broke. The color rushed back into his face, but this time it wasn't from the wine. It was pure embarrassment mixed with something sharper, wounded pride. He could feel David staring at him, waiting to see how he'd react to being dressed down by a waitress in front of a witness. A laugh burst out of him, loud, forced, theatrical. Did that just happen? Marcus said, shaking his head like he'd witnessed something absurd. Did our server just try to give me business advice using terms she probably Googled on her break? He reached for his wine glass and drained it in one aggressive gulp. David, sensing the shift, joined in with a chuckle that sounded relieved. That was wild, man. Where do they find these people? Probably watched too many episodes of Billions, Marcus continued, his voice getting louder, performing now for the nearby tables that had started glancing their way. Section 380 Zoo? Poison pills? She memorized the whole Wikipedia page. He laughed again, but there was an edge to it, a brittleness. He pulled out his phone and opened his banking app with exaggerated movements. His fingers moved quickly across the screen. You know what? Marcus said, his tone dripping with condescension. I appreciate the entertainment. Really, that was adorable. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. Let's get out of here. I've got actual advisors to consult. People with, degrees and experience. Tessa was 2 tables away, taking an order from an elderly couple when Marcus approached. He didn't say a word. He simply placed 5 crisp $100 bills on the edge of her serving tray and gave her a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Stick to pouring wine, sweetheart, he said, loud enough that David could hear. Leave the mergers to the adults. Then he turned on his heel and walked toward the exit, David following with their expensive coats draped over his arm. A few diners watched them leave, murmuring to each other. Tessa stood frozen, staring down at the money on her tray. $500. Her hands started to shake, just slightly. The elderly man she'd been helping looked at her with concern. Miss, are you all right? She forced a smile. Yes, I'm fine. What can I get for you tonight? She finished taking their order on autopilot, her voice steady, even as her pulse hammered in her ears. When she finally made it back to the server station, she found Jorge, the busboy who'd been working double shifts to send money back to his family in Honduras. Jorge, Tessa said quietly, pressing the $500 bills into his hand. "Take this." He looked down at the money, his eyes going wide. "Tessa, no. This is yours. That table, please." Her voice cracked just slightly. "Just take it." Jorge studied her face, seeing something there that made him stop arguing. He folded the bills carefully and tucked them into his pocket. "Thank you," he whispered. Tessa nodded and turned away, busying herself with wiping down an already clean section of the bar. Her reflection stared back at her from the polished surface. Hair pulled back, green apron tied tight, the uniform of someone who didn't matter. But her hands were still shaking. Because Marcus Hale hadn't just insulted her, he'd reminded her of exactly what she'd lost. And worse, what she'd just risked by opening her mouth. Marcus couldn't sleep. He lay in his penthouse bedroom, staring at the ceiling, while the city lights cast moving shadows across the white walls. The sheets were Egyptian cotton, thread count higher than most people's salaries. The mattress had cost $12,000. None of it mattered. His mind wouldn't shut off. Section 382. The words kept circling back, uninvited and persistent. He'd laughed them off at dinner. He'd performed his dismissal perfectly. But now, alone in the dark at 2 a.m, the confidence felt thinner. Hollow. Dilutive rights offering. Marcus rolled over, punched his pillow, tried to force his brain into submission. He had a team of lawyers, Harvard and Yale graduates, who'd spent weeks combing through the Omnicorp documents. They would have caught something that obvious. Of course they would have. They were professionals. She was a waitress. Continuing director provision. He sat up abruptly, throwing the covers off with more force than necessary. His bare feet hit the cold hardwood floor as he crossed the window. The city stretched out below him, 27 floors of separation from the people who served him dinner, and drove his cars and cleaned his office. Marcus pressed his forehead against the glass, his breath fogging the surface. What if she wasn't wrong? The thought made his stomach tighten. He tried to push it away, but it dug in like a splinter. Those weren't generic business terms she'd thrown around. Section 382 was specific, technical, the kind of detail buried in corporate governance documents that even experienced investors sometimes missed. "This is insane," Marcus muttered to his reflection. She probably just got lucky, overheard something, read an article. But his feet were already moving toward his home office. The room was all dark wood and leather, designed to look impressive in video calls. Marcus didn't bother turning on the main lights. He just dropped into his chair and woke up his computer, the blue glow washing over his face. His fingers hesitated over the keyboard. He typed in his password, navigated to the secure server where his legal team stored the due diligence files. The Omnicorp folder contained hundreds of documents, financial statements, audit reports, employment contracts, intellectual property portfolios. And there, near the bottom of the list, was a file labeled Corporate Charter Bylaws Amended.pdf. Marcus's cursor hovered over it. 347 pages. He remembered his lead attorney, Patricia, summarizing it in their last meeting. Standard corporate governance, she'd said. Nothing unusual. They'd spent maybe 10 minutes on it before moving on to the financial projections, which were spectacular. He opened the file. The document loaded slowly, page by page. Marcus skipped to the table of contents, scanning for anything related to shareholder rights or board structure. His eyes caught on a section header. Article 7, Rights Agreement and Anti-Takeover Provisions. His heart rate picked up. He clicked the link. The document jumped to page 284. Dense legal language filled the screen, the kind of text designed to make normal people's eyes glaze over. Marcus forced himself to read slowly, carefully, looking for the terms that Waitress had used with such casual precision. And then he saw it. Section 7.3b. In the event any person or group acquires beneficial ownership of 20% or more of outstanding common stock without prior board approval. Marcus stopped breathing. The rest of the paragraph laid it out exactly as she'd described. The poison pill, the dilution mechanism, the trapdoor built into the foundation of his $4 billion deal. His hands started to shake. Marcus kept reading, his eyes burning as they tracked across the screen. Each sentence was worse than the last. The poison pill provision triggered automatically at 20% ownership. His planned acquisition was for 51%. The moment the ink dried on the purchase agreement, Omnicorp's board could issue new shares to all existing stockholders except him. A rights offering that would flood the market and dilute his controlling stake down to nothing. He scrolled further, his breathing shallow. There it was. Article 9, Section 3. Continuing Director Provisions. Board members couldn't be removed without documented cause for a period of 3 years following any change in control. Even if he somehow bypassed the dilution trap, he'd own a majority of a company whose board he couldn't touch. They'd control every strategic decision while his $4 billion sat locked in a cage. "Oh my God," Marcus whispered. He grabbed his phone, fingers fumbling as he opened his calculator app. The numbers were brutal. $4 billion in acquisition costs. The dilution would reduce his position to roughly 18% based on the formula buried in subsection 7.3c. He'd go from controlling shareholder to minority investor in a company run by hostile directors. But it got worse. Marcus pulled up his liquidity analysis, a document his CFO updated weekly. His available capital, without triggering forced liquidations of other holdings, was approximately $7 billion. $4 billion into Omnicorp meant more than half his liquid wealth locked into a position he couldn't control and couldn't easily exit. The company's bylaws also included a transfer restriction clause. Any shareholder holding more than 10% needed board approval to sell. He'd be trapped. His chest felt tight. Marcus stood up so fast his chair rolled backward and hit the bookshelf. He paced the length of his office, running his hands through his hair. How had his legal team missed this? Patricia had 30 years of M&A experience. The junior associates had combed through every page, or so they'd claimed. He grabbed his phone again and pulled up the email chain from his lawyers. Scrolled back 3 weeks to Patricia's summary memo. There it was. The section about corporate governance, standard anti-takeover provisions consistent with Delaware corporate law. Board has implemented reasonable defensive measures. Recommend proceeding with a negotiated approach to minimize friction. Reasonable defensive measures. She'd seen it. They'd all seen it, but they'd buried it in legal jargon and confident assurances because Marcus had made it clear he wanted the deal done fast. He'd been impatient, aggressive, drunk on the idea of swallowing his biggest competitor whole. And they'd let him walk toward a cliff. Marcus looked at the contract again, at page 402, where the real consequences were spelled out in financial terms. If he'd signed tomorrow morning as planned, by tomorrow afternoon, he'd have been locked into the worst deal of his career. The press would have called it a catastrophic miscalculation. His investors would have revolted. His reputation as a ruthless, brilliant dealmaker would have shattered. All of that had been one signature away. He collapsed back into his chair, his hands covering his face. A waitress had saved him. A woman in a green apron who served wine and cleared plates had seen in 30 seconds what his $1 million legal team had rationalized away. She'd used precise terminology, cited specific sections, and walked away like it was nothing. Marcus's phone showed 3:47 a.m. in glowing numbers. He had a signing scheduled for 9 o'clock this morning. His hand reached for the phone, pulling up his attorney's number. Then he stopped, stared at the screen. Patricia would ask questions, want to know what changed his mind. He'd have to explain that a server at a restaurant had outsmarted her entire team, but none of that mattered anymore. Marcus hit dial. By noon, the news had exploded across every financial platform. Breaking, Tech billionaire Marcus Hale cancels $4 billion Omnicorp acquisition hours before signing. Marcus sat in his office conference room, surrounded by his executive team, while his phone buzzed non-stop on the table. CNBC was running a banner with his face on it. Bloomberg had already published 3 analysis pieces. His investor relations director looked like she might pass out. "Marcus, you need to give them something," she pleaded. "The speculation is killing us. They're saying you lost your nerve, that you couldn't secure financing, that Omnicorp found a better buyer." "Let them speculate," Marcus said flatly, watching the stock ticker on the wall-mounted screen. His company's shares had dipped 3% in the first hour of trading before stabilizing. Omnicorp's stock had dropped 12%. Their board was probably in emergency session right now, wondering what had gone wrong. Patricia, his lead attorney, sat across from him with a carefully neutral expression. "For the record, I still believe we could have negotiated around those provisions." Marcus looked at her without blinking. "You mean the provisions you called standard and reasonable 3 weeks ago?" She had the grace to look uncomfortable. His CFO cleared his throat. "The question is, what's our next move? We've been planning this acquisition for 8 months. The market expects—" "I don't care what the market expects," Marcus interrupted, standing abruptly. "This meeting is over." He grabbed his jacket and walked out while they were still processing his words. His assistant tried to stop him with a stack of urgent messages, but he brushed past her to the private elevator. 20 minutes later, Marcus pulled his Tesla to a stop outside the restaurant with the skyline view. It was lunch service. The parking lot half full with luxury cars that probably belonged to people just like him. People who thought they were smarter than everyone else. He walked through the entrance, his presence immediately drawing attention. The hostess recognized him, her professional smile faltering slightly. "Mr. Hale, welcome back. Do you have a reservation for—" "I need to see one of your servers," Marcus said, his voice tight. She was working last night. Late 20s, glasses, green apron. He realized how absurd that sounded. "She served my table. Table 4. The hostess's smile became even more strained. "I'm not sure I can just—" "Is she here?" Marcus pressed. "Is she working today?" "Sir, if you'd like to make a complaint, I can get the manager." "I'm not making a complaint." Ran a hand over his face, trying to soften his tone. "Please, I just need to speak with her. It's important." The hostess exchanged glances with another staff member hovering nearby. Something unspoken passed between them. A warning, maybe, or recognition that this wasn't a normal request. "Let me get Tony," she said carefully. "Our floor manager. He can help you." She disappeared through a door marked staff only, leaving Marcus standing in the entrance while other diners watched with curiosity. He caught his reflection in the polished brass of a decorative column. Expensive suit, perfect haircut, the kind of man who belonged in places like this. But right now, he felt completely out of his depth. Because somewhere in this building was a woman who had casually dismantled a billion-dollar trap like she was reading a grocery list. A woman who knew things she shouldn't know. A woman who had saved him from professional suicide and then walked away like it meant nothing. And Marcus had told her to stick to pouring wine. The staff door opened again, but it wasn't the hostess who emerged. It was a man built like a linebacker, 6'4" and solid, wearing a manager's badge and an expression that suggested he didn't appreciate billionaires showing up demanding to see his employees. "Mr. Hale." Big Tony's voice was calm, but carried an unmistakable edge. "I understand you're looking for one of my servers." Marcus straightened, trying to reclaim some authority. "Yes, the woman who worked my table last night. I need to speak with her." Tony crossed his arms over his chest, a movement that somehow made him look even larger. "About what, exactly?" "That's between me and her." "See, that's where you're wrong." Tony stepped closer, lowering his voice so the nearby diners wouldn't hear. "Everything that happens to my staff while they're in this building is between me and them. You want to talk to Tessa? You go through me first." Marcus blinked. Tessa. Finally, a name to attach to the face that had been haunting him since 3 in the morning. I'm not here to cause problems, Marcus said, trying to sound reasonable. I just need 5 minutes of her time. Like you needed 5 minutes last night? Tony's jaw tightened. When you left her a $500 tip and told her to stick to pouring wine? Heat crept up Marcus's neck. You heard about that. I hear about everything that happens on my floor. Tony's eyes were hard. Tessa gave that money to Jorge, by the way. Didn't keep a cent of it. You know why? Because she's got more integrity in her pinky finger than most of the people who eat here have in their entire bodies. Marcus felt something twist in his chest. Look, I was an ass, I know that. But I need to talk to her about... About what? The deal you just canceled? Tony's eyebrow raised. Yeah, I watched the news. Funny timing that. You mock her advice one night, then pull out of a $4 billion acquisition the next morning. He leaned in slightly. Makes the person wonder if maybe she knew what she was talking about. Marcus said nothing. What could he say? Tony studied him for a long moment, then shook his head. You want to know why Tessa Brooks is serving wine in a place like this? Because she's working double shifts to pay for her father's rehabilitation. Heart attack left him with medical bills that would crush most families. She sends every spare dollar she makes to a facility upstate. The words hit Marcus like physical blows. She's overqualified for this job, Tony continued. Way overqualified. But nobody else would hire her. She came in here 3 years ago, resume in hand, and I saw something in her eyes. Someone who'd been broken but wasn't going to stay down. His voice dropped lower. So I gave her a chance when the rest of the world wouldn't. Marcus's throat felt tight. I didn't know. Of course you didn't know. People like you don't see people like us. Tony's words weren't angry, just brutally honest. We're furniture. Background noise. Someone to snap your fingers at when your glass is empty. That's not... Marcus started, but the protest died on his lips. Because it was true. He had snapped his fingers. He had treated her like she was invisible, right up until the moment she proved she wasn't. Tony pulled a card from his pocket and held it out. Tessa's shift ends at 3. She usually leaves through the back entrance. Walks to the bus stop on 5th Street. He fixed Marcus with a stare that could cut glass. If you want to talk to her, you do it on her terms, not yours. You don't ambush her at work. You don't make demands. And if you disrespect her again... Tony stepped even closer. I don't care how many billions you have. You'll answer to me. Are we clear? Marcus took the card with hands that weren't quite steady. Crystal clear. Good. Tony turned to leave, then paused. And Mr. Hale, whatever you think you're going to offer her, make sure it's worthy of what she gave up to get here. Then he walked back through the staff door, leaving Marcus alone with a business card and the weight of everything he got in Rome. Marcus sat in his car for 3 hours. He'd parked across the street from the restaurant's back entrance, engine off, watching the service door like some kind of stalker. His phone had buzzed 47 times with increasingly frantic messages from his team. He ignored all of them. At 3:12 p.m., the door opened. Tessa emerged in jeans and a worn leather jacket, her work bag slung over one shoulder. She let her hair down from the tight bun she wore during service, and without the uniform, she looked younger, more vulnerable. She walked with her head down, earbuds in, moving toward the bus stop with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd made this trip 1,000 times. Marcus got out of his car. His dress shoes clicked on the pavement as he crossed the street. Tessa was halfway down the block when he called out, Ms. Brooks. She stopped, turned slowly. When she saw him, her entire body tensed like she was calculating escape routes. Please, Marcus said, holding up both hands in surrender. I just want to talk. Tessa pulled out her earbuds, her expression guarded. How did you know where? Then understanding crossed her face. Tony told you. He told me a lot of things. Marcus stayed where he was, leaving space between them. He also told me if I disrespected you again, he'd make me regret it. Sounds like Tony. Tessa shifted her bag to her other shoulder. What do you want, Mr. Hale? The formality stung. Marcus took a breath. I need to know how you knew. About the poison pill, the continuing director provision, all of it. Does it matter? Yes. The word came out harder than he intended. He softened his voice. You saved me from losing half my liquidity. My lawyers missed it. My entire team missed it. But you saw it in seconds. He stepped closer, carefully. How? Tessa looked away, jaw tight. A bus rumbled past on the main street, and for a moment, Marcus thought she might just walk away. Let him stand there with his question hanging in the air. But then she met his eyes again, and something in her expression shifted. Resignation, maybe? Or just exhaustion from carrying the weight of a secret for too long. I didn't miss it, she said quietly. I wrote it. Marcus felt the ground tilt beneath him. What? 3.5 years ago, Omnicorp hired my firm to restructure their corporate governance. Tessa's voice was flat, professional, like she was reading from a report. I designed her entire anti-takeover defense architecture. The poison pill trigger at 20%. The board protection clauses. The transfer restrictions. All of it. Her lips pressed into a thin line. I know that contract better than anyone alive, because I spent 6 months making it bulletproof. You worked for Omnicorp? I work for a lot of companies. Tessa adjusted her bag again. A nervous gesture. Before everything fell apart. Marcus's mind raced, pieces clicking into place. You're not just someone who used to work in finance. You were a VP at Harfield Capital, Tessa finished. Youngest person to ever make partner track. I specialize in hostile takeover defense and corporate restructuring. My designs protected 17 Fortune 500 companies from aggressive acquisitions. She laughed, but it was bitter. I was very good at my job. What happened? Tessa's expression hardened. I found something I wasn't supposed to find, and I made the mistake of thinking integrity mattered more than loyalty. The evening air felt suddenly colder. Marcus could see the pain behind her eyes, the weight of whatever she'd lost. I reported it, Tessa continued, to the SEC, to the board, to everyone who was supposed to care. And for doing the right thing, I got blacklisted, buried in legal threats, and erased from the industry. She looked directly at him. So forgive me if I don't have much faith in billionaires who play with other people's livelihoods for sport. Marcus stood there, speechless, as the full magnitude of what she'd sacrificed settled over him. How did you know? She asked, echoing his earlier question. That I was right. I checked, Marcus said quietly. At 3 a.m. Found everything exactly where you said it would be. Tessa nodded, unsurprised. Then you're welcome. And we're done here. She turned to leave. Wait, Marcus said. Tessa stopped, but didn't turn around. Her shoulders were rigid, defensive. I need to understand, Marcus said, moving closer, but still keeping his distance. If you were blacklisted, if speaking up cost you everything, why say anything to me? You could have just kept quiet, stayed invisible, like you've been doing for 3 years. Tessa turned slowly, and for the first time since he'd met her, her composure cracked. You think I wanted to say something? You think I wanted to put myself on your radar? Then why did you? Because I couldn't help it. The words burst out of her, raw and honest. Because I've been watching from the sidelines for 3 years, reading about deals in the business section while I clear plates. Because I see the patterns, the mistakes, the traps that everyone else misses, and I can't just... She stopped, pressing her fingers to her temples. I can't turn it off. My brain won't let me. Marcus watched her struggle with the admission, and something in his chest tightened. Every morning before my shift, I read the financial reports, Tessa continued, her voice quieter now. Bloomberg, WSJ, TechCrunch. I track the major players. I analyze their strategies, their acquisitions, their mistakes. She laughed bitterly. It's pathetic, really, like a retired athlete watching games from the stands, critiquing plays they'll never make again. It's not pathetic, Marcus said. Isn't it? Tessa's eyes were bright with unshed tears. I'm a waitress who memorizes corporate bylaws for fun, who reads SEC filings on her lunch break, who still dreams in venture capital terms, even though that world doesn't want me anymore. She wiped at her eyes impatiently. When I saw you celebrating that Omnicorp deal, I recognized it immediately. My work, my defensive architecture, and I knew exactly what would happen if you signed. You could have let me walk into it. Maybe I should have. Tessa's voice hardened. Men like you, rich, arrogant, treating people like furniture, you don't usually face consequences for your mistakes. You just throw money at the problem or blame someone else. She met his gaze directly. But I couldn't do it, because despite everything, despite being blacklisted and humiliated and erased, I still believe the work matters more than revenge. Marcus felt the weight of her words settle over him. What was the fraud? The thing you reported? Tessa was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was distant, like she was reciting something she'd testified about in depositions. My firm was managing pension funds for 3 major unions. My boss, my mentor, had been skimming fractional percentages off every transaction. Tiny amounts that most audits wouldn't catch. But over 5 years, he'd stolen nearly $40 million from people who couldn't afford to lose anything. Marcus's breath caught. I found the offshore accounts by accident, Tessa continued, hidden in a labyrinth of shell companies. When I showed him the evidence, he begged me to keep quiet, said it was complicated, said I didn't understand the full picture. Her jaw clenched. I went to the SEC anyway, and within 3 weeks, I was fired for performance issues. Every firm I applied to suddenly had concerns about my judgment. My mentor had friends everywhere, powerful friends. They protected him. They protected themselves. Tessa's voice was hollow. He took a slap on the wrist, paid some fines, and retired to his house in Hamptons. I now blacklisted, buried in legal fees defending myself against bogus lawsuits, and watched my father have a heart attack from the stress of watching his daughter's career destroyed. She looked at Marcus with eyes that had seen too much. So yes, Mr. Hale, I analyze deals from the sidelines, because it's the only piece of that life I have left. The silence stretched between them, heavy with everything she'd lost. Marcus's voice came out rough. What's your father's name? Tessa blinked, surprised by the question. Richard Brooks. Why? Because when I hire you, I'm going to make sure his medical bills are paid in full. You're not hiring me, Tessa said, but her voice lacked conviction. Marcus reached into his car through the open window and pulled out a tablet. He'd prepared this during the 3 hours he'd waited, typing furiously while his phone exploded with ignored messages. Read it first, he said, handing it to her, before you say no. Tessa took the tablet with trembling fingers. The document on the screen was a contract, but not the kind she expected. Her eyes scanned the first page, then widened. This isn't an employment offer. No, Marcus agreed. It's a partnership agreement. Tessa looked up sharply. Marcus, I can't afford to. You're not buying in. I am. He pointed at a specific clause. 20% equity stake in Hale Industries' strategic division. Chief Strategy Officer, with full veto power over all acquisitions and major investments. Salary of $2 million annually, plus performance bonuses tied to deals we avoid, not just deals we close. Tessa's hands shook harder as she scrolled through the document. This is insane. This is smart, Marcus corrected. I built a billion-dollar company by taking risks and moving fast. But speed without wisdom is just recklessness. He met her eyes. You saved me from losing half my net worth because you saw what everyone else missed. Not because you're smarter than my lawyers, though you clearly are, but because you care more about being right than being liked. I don't understand why I need someone who isn't afraid to tell me I'm an idiot, Marcus said simply. Someone who won't rationalize away red flags because I'm impatient or because the deal looks good on paper. Someone who lost everything for doing the right thing and would do it again. He stepped closer. That's you, Tessa. That's who I need beside me. Tessa stared at the contract, tears sliding down her cheeks. Your board will never approve this. Your investors... Already called an emergency meeting for tomorrow morning, Marcus interrupted. I'm going to tell them that I'm bringing on a partner who just saved me from a $4 billion disaster. If they have a problem with that, they can divest. His voice softened. Your father's medical bills will be paid regardless of whether you sign. That's not conditional. That's just me trying to make up for being an ass who told you to stick to pouring wine. Tessa laughed through her tears, the sound breaking in the middle. That was pretty terrible. I know. She looked at the contract again, scrolling to the final page. Her finger hovered over the signature line. If I do this, if I come back, they'll come for me. The people who blacklisted me. They'll try to destroy this before it starts. Let them try. Marcus's voice was steel. I've got resources they don't. And more importantly, I've got you watching my back now. Tessa set the tablet down on the hood of his car. Without a word, she reached behind her back and untied her green apron. She folded it carefully, running her thumb over the fabric one last time. Then she walked back toward the restaurant's entrance. Marcus's heart sank. He'd miscalculated, pushed too hard, offered too much too soon. But Tessa pushed through the service door and emerged 30 seconds later with Big Tony following behind her. She handed him the apron. I'm sorry, Tony. I can't do double shifts anymore. Tony looked at the apron, then at Marcus standing by his car, then back at Tessa. A slow smile spread across his face. About damn time. He pulled her into a bear hug. Go show them who you really are. Tessa pulled back, wiping her eyes. Thank you for everything. You earned it, kid, every single day. She walked back to Marcus, picked up a tablet, and signed her name with steady fingers. Then she extended her hand. Marcus shook it, feeling the firm grip of someone who'd fought her way back from nothing. So, partner? Tessa fed, a hint of her old confidence returning. What's the next big move? Marcus grinned and opened the car door for her. There's a biotech merger I've been watching. Something feels off about their IP portfolio. Tessa slid into the passenger seat. Forward me the due diligence files. I'll have notes by morning. As Marcus walked around to the driver's side, he glanced back at the restaurant. Big Tony stood in the doorway, green apron in hand, watching them with satisfaction. Marcus started the engine. Beside him, Tessa was already pulling up financial reports on the tablet, her mind clearly racing through scenarios and strategies. One rule, Marcus said as he pulled out of the parking lot. Tessa looked up. What's that? If you see me walking into a trap, don't wait until I'm halfway through dinner to tell me. Tessa smiled, a real smile this time. Deal. They drove toward the skyline, two minds that had nearly destroyed each other, now working as one, ready to reshape the rules of a game that had once left her behind. And that's where Tessa Brooks' story takes a turn that most people never get. She got her second chance. But here's what breaks my heart. There are thousands of brilliant people out there just like Tessa. People working jobs they're overqualified for. People who tried to do the right thing and got punished for it. People waiting tables, driving rideshares, stocking shelves, while their genius goes to waste because the system crushed them for having integrity. Most of them will never get a Marcus Hale walking back through that door. If this story moved you, if it made you think twice about the people serving your coffee or checking you out at the grocery store, then do something about it. Hit that like button. Not for me, for every person out there who's still waiting for their redemption arc. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss stories that expose the truth about power, money, and the people who refuse to stay silent. And here's the most important part. Share this video. Send it to someone who needs to hear that their worth isn't defined by their current circumstances. Send it to someone who's fought about speaking up but is terrified of the cost. Send it to someone who judges people by their job title instead of their character. Drop a comment right now and tell me where you're watching from. Tell me if you've ever been underestimated. Tell me if you know a Tessa Brooks in your own life. Because these stories, they're not just entertainment. They're mirrors showing us who we really are when no one important is watching. The algorithm only pushes content that people engage with. So if you want more stories that matter, stories that challenge the way we think about success and failure, about power and integrity, then you have to help me fight for visibility in a sea of mindless content. Like, subscribe, share, comment. Don't just be moved, be part of the movement. I'll see you in the next story. And trust me, what I have coming next will absolutely blow your mind.